start off, we're going to show you how to install with the standalone binary CLI. So we're going to go to firebase.google.com, and in our search bar, we can type CLI. This will bring up the URL for the CLI download, and we get to this page. So since I'm running on Windows, I'm going to be downloading it for Windows, and we're going to download the standard CLI binary. We're also, another option for this is installing it through Node, and we're going to go through that a little bit later. So now that's complete. It'll be a little bit blocked, but we can run anyway. And that brings us up to here. So we'll check to see that we're authenticated, and since we just installed it, we're not. But we are able to go in and authenticate. And we'll just ask for permissions to be able to access, where we can hit allow. So now that's done, we can go back into here, type Firebase help, and it will show us all the commands that we have available.
That was really easy. And just to make sure, we can only use these Firebase commands within this terminal window, correct?
Yeah, these commands can only be accessed through this terminal utilizing this install method. So now we're going to be going over how to get Firebase installed using Node. So the first step that we could do is we're going to install Node from Node's website. So we can go to Node website and we can click this button right here, which will give us an MSI, which we can launch, which will look something like this. So from here, we're going to hit next, accept the licensing agreement, hit next again, choose the install location, and we're just going to hit next to this and uncheck that box and hit next. This will ask to install. Okay, hit yes, it will just run through an install. And this is a relatively short installation process that should take about a minute. But once that's done, we can hit finish. We're going to launch a command prompt. We're going to go back to this website really quickly and copy the install command. So from right here, we're just going to copy it in. And we're going to hit enter. And it'll take about a minute to install all the necessary files. But this will automatically append it to your path and make it super easy to run through. So now that we see that the download's done, we can type Firebase help. And it'll show us all of the options, and we can go from there.
And this command can now be used in any terminal window, even in IDE, right?
Yeah, so if I had an IDE open, I would be able to type Firebase in that IDE, and it would work seamlessly.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to show how to install the Firebase CLI on Mac now. Actually, this installation will work both on macOS and Linux. So in the same tab for Firebase CLI docs, we can click on macOS. It's going to bring us down to different options you have. As you can see, you can also still install it with NPM, with what Delton showed us previously. But I'm going to go forward and copy this auto install script. So I'm going to open my terminal in here. And as you can see, if I run Firebase right now, this will actually fail because it cannot find the command. So I'm going to paste this in my terminal. Oops. Let me copy this again. Paste this in. It will prompt you for your passwords. This is very, very quick. It should take less than about 10 seconds. Cool. And now if I type in Firebase help, should be able to see all your help commands.
Awesome. So those are the 3 different ways that we can get Firebase installed on our computer. And if there is any issues, we will be having office hours on Friday. So until then, we hope you have a good Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Cheers.
Bye.
Привет.
Hello.
Servus.
Marhaba.
Hola.
Hello.
I'm inspired that there's so many people working to accomplish the same goal of creating a connected future.
By having students lead clubs on campus directly supported by Google developers, that's the best way to reach out to students.
It's really inspirational always to hear about members of the community who echo your values and echo your beliefs.
I've been listening more than I've been speaking, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because I'm just getting all these ideas.
Google, it needs to reach a wider audience and be more relatable as a company, and I think Google is one of the brands that is very good at doing that.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I know it's a long weekend for some of you from the US. Welcome to our first session with our Firebase series. This is going to be run with the help of a lot of our DSC Developer Student Club leads from across the US as well as Canada. So before I kickstart things off, a few housekeeping rules. Make sure to drop a comment on the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. We would love to see, we would love to hear where you all joining in from. We also ran a pre 5-minute clip. I know the quality wasn't the best, showing you how to install the command line interface for Firebase. Now, this is important because if you don't have that done, there are other ways you can kind of follow us along. But if you can take another few minutes and get it installed, that would help you once our sessions kickstart later. That being said, very quick plug to Developer Student Clubs. I'm going to put this clip right here. 1 second. This is the... So that's the link. dsc.community.dev is a place where you need to go if you want to find where your chapter is. If you're a university student, if your chapter is not listed, find the closest chapter that you can become a member with, because we've been running a number of different events throughout this year, and we got amazing events planned for next year as well. So you'll get all those updates, and you'll get connected to that community and even be participating in some of the sessions that they've been doing. So before I hand things over to Rafa, Andre, and Dalton, I want to show you another quick thing. So today's session, we're going to be using Discord. Can we get the link up for Discord very quickly? And I'm going to share my screen. Process on Discord is very simple. Once you join the link, once you join the server, can we get the link up? Yeah, so here's the link for Discord. Once you get join the server, you'll get a welcome message. You're welcome to go through it, listening to the video. Then we have all the rules listed. At the bottom, you need to react to this little icon here to join the server, and all the other channels will be unlocked for you. So make sure to do that. And then once you do that, we have a few spaces set up for you. So we have stage 1, stage 2. Those are going to be places where a lot of our tutors that you see on the right who are going to be doing office hours and doing sessions. And then we have Q&A lobbies set up for you when you get stuck while the session is running live. So you can jump on there and one of our tutors can jump in and then help you out with any of the questions. Now, the beauty about this is you can share your screen, you can bug test, you can do a lot of that on the go, so you don't have to wait and wait to hear from us over the week. Now, some of our tutors also set up office hours, I think on Fridays, if I remember correctly. So this applies to our Firebase series, Flutter series, Cloud Study Jams, Cloud Hero type of events. And there's other events that we've been running on a regular basis. So these are all the setups for that. And then one other thing I want to show you is under the developer series, you can obviously see our Firebase series. Dalton, Rafa, and Andre, all of them are already there waiting for you. So that being said, I'm super excited to introduce and kickstart this session. And I want to bring Rafa onto stage. Hey, Rafa, let me get rid of the screen. So, Rafa, where are you tuning in? Where are you helping us out from?
So, I'm in Redlands, California right now. I go to the University of Redlands, and so I'm still...
I hear it's really warm there.
It is really warm for compared to Canadian standards, at least.
Okay, Rafa. So, what are we gonna learn about this? How long did it take for you to set this all up, and what can we expect in the series?
So collectively, I'd say we've been working on this for about 2 weeks now, but it's generally a very quick process, especially since we're going to be providing a lot of the code. But today we're going to be learning how to use Firebase to make a very simple but effective e-commerce app, as well as deploying it to Firebase and having it hosted on the web for free.
So I'm going to put your slides up if you're ready, and then I'm gonna disappear into the background.
Awesome. So my name is Raf, as we've said, and I'm studying computer science with a minor in physics and math. I love programming. I generally like programming in Python. That actually led me to Django initially, which is another backend framework, but now I predominantly use Firebase for all of my projects. I also really enjoy swimming. And over to Dalton.
Hey everyone, I'm Dalton. I'm the DSC lead for Hofstra University, and I'm majoring in computer science. Some of my interests include mountain biking and developing Flutter applications. I really like Firebase because of how seamlessly it integrates with Flutter and how easy it makes my life on a daily basis. So now we could go over to Andre.
Hey everybody, my name is Angie and I'm tuning in from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. I'm a DSC lead for Conestoga College chapter, and I'm very excited to show you more about Firebase. I have more of a Node.js and .NET background, but I'm very, very excited to show off Firebase for you all.
If I remember correctly, you all are going to be on the Slack as well. Sorry, on Discord as well as on the YouTube chat. So anytime you have a question, make sure to ping them, and then one of them will be able to jump and answer on either platform.
Yeah, we would all love to integrate, to communicate, and to engage with all of you. That's actually the theme of our e-commerce site. It's going to be completely open sourced, and we'll speak a little bit about that. But today we're going to be taking a look at Firebase and how we can use it to build our very own e-commerce store and then host it on the web for completely free. So if we could have the link to the website dropped in the chat real quick and put up on the screen, and that'll take us to our e-commerce store. So when we're on this store, we can see that it's a little bit simple, but it's by design. We actually hope that a lot of you will contribute to the site, and then we can showcase those contributions at the beginning of each episode. So under the More dropdown, there is links to resources, as well as a link to the Firebase console, which we'll use in a bit, as well as the GitHub account and links to documentation for how to contribute. As you can see, we are currently using the Cloud Firestore SDK that allows us to pull all the information from Firestore, as well as the cloud storage to store all of our pictures. And we're also using the authentication SDK, which allows you users to sign in with multiple providers and securely access your website and applications. So back to the presentation. We thought that a good place to start would be going over some terminology, because I certainly get lost when I hear words that I don't understand. And some good to knows on the left-hand side is all about development. So what is front-end development? Front-end development is everything that your users can see and touch and interact with. And back-end development is everything that happens behind the screen. So sending users emails or logging users in or reading and writing data. The merge between all of these services is known as your tech stack. So as you can see in the bottom left, there is the merge between Firebase, Flutter, and Google Cloud Platform. That allows you to make a really seamless, cohesive app experience. And then on the right-hand side is some common abbreviations that are good to know. We'll be using them today. The first one is SDK. SDK is a software development kit, which is a bundled up piece of code like tools and libraries, and it's been packaged and distributed for use. Some examples of these are the Flutter and Android SDKs, if you've used those before. But today we'll be interacting with the core Firebase SDK through remote hosting servers on content delivery networks. So CDN or content delivery networks are services that can be easily accessed from all around the world, and they will ensure that your Firebase services are always ready to go when your users need them. We're going to be using these CDN tags to import all of the individual Firebase SDKs as we need them. And then lastly is CLI. We're going to be using the Firebase CLI, and a CLI is a command line interface, and it is an application which is run in a terminal window. You may have had some experience using the Angular or Flutter CLI before, but today we'll be using the Firebase CLI to deploy your site, as well as to run your site in a test environment using the Firebase emulators. So what is Firebase and why do we need it? Well, Firebase is a backend as a service, which is built and maintained by Google. Firebase's mission is to help developers of all sizes, small or large, succeed in starting and growing their own full-stack applications. It takes some really complex but common problems that occur during a product's lifecycle, and it makes it really easy to implement. Examples of this is, as we've seen, authentication, as well as storing of data, but Firebase really has much, much more. A huge misconception about Firebase is that it's a prototyping tool, but actually, Firebase has everything you need to scale from your first user to your millionth and beyond. So Firebase is divided into three main categories of tools, and they each have specific goals. The first one is to build better apps. It helps you build these better apps by making these complex coding processes much easier. We've spoken a little bit about authentication and Firestore. Today we're going to be going over hosting, as well as extensions and storage. The next section is all about improving your app's quality. This helps you catch your issues early and fix them quickly. The last section is to grow and engage with your users. This helps you understand how your users are engaging with your app and track your user experience. And one of the main advantages of using Firebase is that all of these services are integrated under one umbrella, and they all work together really, really seamlessly. Now, there is a lot of these products. As you can see, there's almost 20 of them. And while that may seem like a lot, the average developer will only really use a handful of them in each app. So now we'll be moving on to the Firebase console to create our account. And
so before we jump into that high level, this is a question for all three of you. Give me a profile of an individual who should pay attention to this series. Now, that being said, I know, Rafa, you mentioned you used to work with Python a lot, and Andre, you've done other development, and you work with other development frameworks, including you, Dalton. But somebody who's new to, let's say, web development, what stage should they think about learning Firebase, or what kind of technical pre-qualifications do you think they need?
I can answer that if
yeah.
Anybody minds. The beautiful thing with Firebase is that you're basically not bound to a specific language. Like whatever language you're used to, whatever framework you're used to, you can use Firebase in that environment. If you develop mobile applications or if you develop for web, Firebase will have tools and services for you. So it's basically an amazing service to use in whatever.
So I think we had a conversation a little earlier, and you mentioned one of your friends who's a designer who's really good at the design side, who was able to convert those designs into HTML, CSS with a little bit of JavaScript. Now, this gave him the ability to, add logins, manage documentation, and even host a website for free using Firebase, right? So, I think if you're tuning in, and even if you're not a developer, if you're not a full stack developer, but you understand what those concepts are, this is a great way to kind of integrate and elevate your skill set, and then hopefully double down on something like Flutter. So now you can bring those web skills into a little bit more mobile relevant with the same kind of background having Firebase. So yeah. So anybody who's tuning in, or if you can recommend others who are not necessarily developers but understand the basic concepts of it, that will be really helpful for them to learn this as well. I'm going to keep sending you questions as you go through, and then we can. Yeah. So, okay. So there's a question just came in, or a comment that just came in. I really had a misconception that Firebase is only useful for providing database to mobile apps, but now it's cleared. Now the interesting thing about this, Tarun, is Firebase was created to support chat applications on mobile, and that's why. So when anybody wanted to build a chat application, Firebase was built to give that backend to it. That's why it's so responsive, because there was a time where when people were chatting, there was some apps came up with this feature where you can watch what somebody's typing and you can see as they're typing. So that was very responsive, and they elevated it and added other features to it. So yes, it was a very mobile focused platform, but now it's available for web, mobile, and other, even Unity, correct, Rafa? Yeah, Unity.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a game developer and you're looking to get into the game developing space, you can use Firebase too. And that's one of the best things about Firebase, is that even if you're a web developer today, you could really be an app developer tomorrow.
I like the concept where if you ever tuned into the fireside chat we did with Flutter, the way Chris explained Flutter was, this is a platform to build anything you want, and then after that you can pick whether you want to go mobile, whether it's Android, iOS, or web. That was a very powerful concept. I think Firebase, in those same lines, is a backend as a service. You can build anything you want, and then you can put it onto anything, any other interface you want. Either it's mobile, web, chat applications, or anything. Yeah. Sorry, back to you.
No problem. So if we navigate to the e-commerce site, the e-commerce store, there's a link to the Firebase console. So in our Firebase console, here we have access to everything about the use cases, pricing, documentation. Use cases is really great because it allows you to see there's massive companies like the New York Times and The Economist and Alibaba, which all use Firebase to manage their applications. As well as this, you can see some information about pricing and documentation, as well as the community and some places to get support for your development process. For our use case today, we're going to be going to the actual Firebase console, and we're going to be creating a new Firebase project. So over here, you can click Add Project, and then we'll give it a name. I'm going to call it Testing. And then we do want to add Google Analytics, because this will allow us to track some user engagement. We'll speak a little bit about analytics in a bit. If you do not have an account for analytics yet, you will be asked to make one. But if you have one, you can just select it. Sorry, this is taking a little time.
Madhusha, you're muted.
Encourage everybody to follow along. as you do.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. If everybody could follow along, that'd be great. Because we will need one of these later on in this event.
And by the way, by the end of this series, you'll be able to host or create your own website and host it for free using Firebase too. So,
exactly.
And what features do you get? You get SSL certification. You have 10 gigs of space with bandwidth. So there's a lot of controlled features available there.
So we're not going to be doing anything with Firebase just yet, because we want to explain a little bit of the features, and then we're going to come back and learn how to host your website using Firebase. So although we only have a web application in Firebase after today, as we mentioned, there is the ability to add Flutter, and we don't have a Flutter app yet, but who knows? Maybe our local Flutter wizard, Rohan Kadal, DSC lead from LSU, can make us a Flutter app. So we're actually going to be kicking off the series by introducing you to Firebase hosting, and this should give you the tools necessary to have any of your own personal websites hosted on Firebase for completely free. Hosting is a static web provider that is fast, secure, and reliable, and all of these the content for your website is going to be stored on cache drives around the world using our CDN servers. Every deployed site is configured over a connection that is secured automatically and configured with an SSL certificate. So you'll always have security with that little gray lock in the top left-hand corner. And then no matter where in the world your users are, you'll be able to expect them to receive your web pages or progressive web apps quickly and securely. And then the best feature of Firebase, in my opinion, is that it's really, really easy to use. You can deploy your web page in just one line. And we're going to see how to do that after we create the web property. So if you could navigate back to Firebase, over here you will see there's the ability to add these different properties like an iOS app, Android, but we're going to be adding a web application. So we'll give it a nickname. And then we'll say we want to set up hosting, and this will automatically assign a hosting name. We'll register the app, and these will be the Firebase SDKs that we're going to install, but we'll get to that at the end. And then if you haven't yet, you can run this tool in your terminal window or in any console window to install Firebase globally in your project. But again, we can do that as well. These are some setup commands. And once you have that, you now can see this is your web property. There are some configuration files that we're going to need. So keep this in mind. I'm not going to need them just yet, but we will need them in a sec. So in next week's event, we're actually going to be showing you how to do one of the most difficult things in app development, and that's going to be securely registering your users. Luckily for us, though, Firebase has you covered when it comes to protecting your users' data. The Firebase Auth is an out-of-the-box authentication UI, and it's been highly optimized to give your users the best experience possible when logging into your app. So, Andrew, could you give us a little bit of insight into the Firebase Authentication SDK?
Yeah, absolutely. I think authentication is like one of the most annoying things that you encounter when you build a website, something that you always live on the back burner. Firebase provides a lot of built-in tools that you don't really need to manage, and they are very, very easy to use to include authentication in your apps. So you have your email sign-in, you have your sign-in with your phone, as well as multiple different providers like Google, GitHub, Facebook, whatsoever. We will be having a whole separate event on authentication actually next Saturday. That's going to be the topic of our next event. I will be showing in code how to complete all of those steps. And yeah, we're also going to be covering something called Firebase UI, which is a very, very neat thing to start off authentication without building any views. So basically, you include one HTML page on your website and you're good to go. You have your email sign-in built already from get-go, and you don't need to even write any code. That's pretty amazing.
And then the following week. Oh, sorry,
sorry to interrupt. Would you mind taking some questions? We got some questions coming in. I think everybody else would love to hear your feedback on this. First question. Okay, so talking about Firebase and Flutter, are we supposed to learn one over the other first? If so, which first? So Nathaniel asks this question. Anybody want to take a stab at this?
Yeah. Or Dalton, if you want to go ahead, I know you have more experience between tying those two together.
Yeah, so there's not really one that you're supposed to learn over the other. You can sort of take your time and sort of figure out which one you will work with. And then once it comes time that you want to integrate them together, they integrate together super easily and super efficiently. It's like 2 or 3 lines of code, and then you have Firebase in your app, and then you can use any feature that you would like to. So it's not really one over the other.
So Flutter is pretty much like building the front end of the applications on both iOS, Android, and the web, whereas Firebase is a backend. So if you already have, let's say you already have a good knowledge about building CSS, HTML, JavaScript, little widgets on the web, you can always use Firebase as a backend to support it. Next question is from Aman. A silly question, but how good is the integration of Firebase with Flutter? I know we go on a tangent here, but I think Dalton, you answered this question as well.
Pretty great.
Okay, so both Google products, they integrate really well. GCP, everything is in one roof, so it's a good one to have. Can we host dynamic web applications? So Tarun asks, can we host dynamic web applications on Firebase? Rafa?
Yeah, absolutely. Rafa, if you want to.
So I imagine you mentioning progressive web apps like Vue and React and Angular, and yes, most definitely you can. And that's actually where Firebase shines the most, because as Madhusha mentioned, Firebase was built as a real-time chat application, which allows you to have real-time updates. Whatever happens on Firebase will happen across all of your users' front-end devices. It's a really great integration.
Don't quote me on this. If I remember correctly, the maximum pings you can do is 200,000 a second. So you can have 200,000 customers using your application at the same time, ping in that same second, and Firebase is able to handle it. That much traffic. Usually you don't see it up to that level. If you have 200,000 a second, that means you should definitely be like Facebook or Twitter level of integration. But yeah, this is why it was built. The other misconception I want to highlight is Firebase is not a prototyping tool. You can use it definitely to do your prototyping, and you can use the same code base, the same infrastructure to scale it, like Rafa said, up to millions of users. So keep that in mind. Next question, very quickly, Leonardo, is Firebase usable in multiple apps, or its strength is SPAS? Anybody else want to take a stab at this?
I think I answered this a little bit. It does shine brightly in single-page applications because you have the real-time loading and RxJS and all of the goodies that come along with SPAs. But you are able to use it in multi-page apps, and that's actually what we're going to be doing today. Today we have just a very basic vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript application, and we're integrating it using Firebase and the CDN tags.
Awesome. Okay, we got 2 more questions I'm going to quickly take. Yes, Claire, we are going to be in Discord. That is correct. Once things are once we start kicking things off, Dalton, Andre will be available on the Discord channel answering any one-on-one questions. Tarun asks again, I'm having a Flask application, so will it be okay to host? This is going to go to Rafa because I know you worked with Python before.
Yeah, so I haven't worked specifically with Flask before, but I do know that their object relational mapping database is a little bit scary. So having it integrate with Firebase would be a really good up for you. I'm not 100% sure how the integration would look, but I'm fairly certain that you will be able to integrate your web applications that are built using Flask.
Awesome. Okay, I know this is the first session. Before we jump into anything technical, send us all your questions because we want you to understand the concept behind Firebase. That way you'll understand why you need to learn this, the importance of it, before we start jumping in and putting the code in place. So Rafa, I'm going to hand things back to you. And if you have any other questions, send it back to us and one of us will be able to answer it.
Awesome, thank you. So the third topic that we're going to be covering in our event series is going to be Cloud Firestore. And this is how we are managing all of our data about products as well as users within our e-commerce app. So Firestore is what's known as an unrelational database. It's quite different to the rows and columns that you might be used to seeing in traditional databases. But one of the biggest benefits about Firestore, instead of using traditional database, is these real-time updates. So you can store and sync the data in real time, as Madhusha said, across 200,000 users all at once. And again, this is important because Firebase and Firestore was designed to be a real-time chat application. And we're actually going to demonstrate this in Firebase. And if you have a look at our Cloud Firestore section, Dalton, would you mind explaining this a little bit? It's very different to what people might used to be seeing in a traditional database sense.
Yeah, so as you can notice, this isn't format as your normal SQL databases would be. It's actually format as a non-structured query language, NoSQL. So for this, we have two sort of vague notions of elements of our thing. We have collections, which store a bunch of documents, and documents, which have two properties. They have the fields property, which are individual properties that are specific to them. And then they're also able to store sub-collections. So going into this, we're going to go into products, shoes, and the inventory, which is the sub-collection. And then we can see all the documents within that collection. So we can click on one of those product IDs, and it shows us all of the information about that shoe. So the brand is Google. We have the link to the image. We have the name. We have if it's on sale or not, and we have price. And the important thing to note about these fields are they're actually typed fields. So you can see that they all have a data type, whether it be string, number, Boolean, or any sort of other field that you'd be able to use.
And then here we'll demonstrate this real-time update. And although we're not using RxJS, so it won't load automatically, as soon as I click this button, you should all be able to refresh the site, and the shoe changed from an Air Jordan 1 to, Air Google 1 to an Air Google 3. And if we go back, and change this again, and refresh the page, you'll be able to see it changes in real time. And I think that that's a really, really cool application of Firebase. And then one of the other really important features about Cloud Firestore is the offline handling and the ability to scale automatically. Andrew, could you tell me a little bit more about the offline handling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think offline handling is a very, very important feature of Firestore because it comes for free basically in any app you use. For iOS and Android, it comes straight up built in. You don't even need to include any pieces of code. So what it does is, the gist of it is that we live in a world where you have tunnels, you have airplanes, your users will be offline and online constantly. And you want to provide this seamless experience to your users so they don't have these kind of buffers as they go. So basically, when your users are offline and they perform some actions, let's say they post new documents to your Firestore or they read something, all of those actions are cached on your device automatically with Cloud Firestore. When your users come back online, those going to be synced up with the server, and all your updates going to be performed at that point. So yeah, as I said, you don't need to, with this functionality, you don't need to build any code, you need to write any code. In web, we'll see that you will need to include a couple of lines, but not too much. I think that's very, very amazing.
And although Cloud Firestore is great, it's not the only solution available for storing your data with Firebase. The real-time database is more lightweight than Firestore, but still offers many of the advantages, such as the real-time updates and the automatic scaling and the offline support. And it can be used in conjunction with Firestore. We're going to be using Firestore predominantly, but we do hope to touch on the real-time database in future events. Another SDK we'll be using is Cloud Storage, and this is how you will add images of the products to our app. But again, we'll be going in depth on this in our Cloud Firestore event. The last feature that we're going to be covering in our introductory series is Google Analytics. Analytics for Firebase is really at the heart of features that will help developers grow their apps. Once you have an audience established, you can modify all your in-app experiences through remote config changes. That's something that we'll get into in our intermediary series, as well as targeted advertisements in the Google AdWords platform. So at this point, we want to have some engagement. So if all of you could drop in the chat where you are viewing us from, I want to demonstrate possibly my favorite feature of Firebase and Google Analytics. So we're going to navigate to our Analytics dashboard. And on the dashboard, you'll be able to see that you can track which pages your users are on, as well as how you get them and where they're coming from. But what I really want to show is the stream view. So for those of you that dropped your location in the chat, as you can see here, Firebase can automatically detect where your users are coming from. And we can see here that we've got some in the US, we've got some from India, Albania, Canada, Colombia, Kenya. That's really cool. Oh, South Africa. That's really awesome to see. And I think this is one of the coolest parts about Firebase is that, once you have your web application, you can distribute it to all your friends and family members, and you can see them using it in real time. And then along with this, Analytics has the ability for you to create events. So these are events that are built in, like when is the user coming onto your page for the first time, as well as when do they start a session. But we can make custom events, kind of like if a user clicks on your cart, or maybe they look at a certain product, that can be marked as what's known as a conversion. So for those of you that's used the Google AdWords platform, you would have seen conversions before. Conversions are really great ways for you to say, well, I have run this advertisement and it got me to this point, which I believe will give me a return on investment. In other words, I ran an ad for my shoes and then my user ended up putting a shoe in their cart. We could mark that as a conversion over here in Analytics, and that would use machine learning algorithms to optimize our Google ad campaigns. So it'll not only give a good experience for users that are trying to get to your site, but also for customers. If you're developing for customers, it'll save them money on their advertising too. So one of the other features that I think is really powerful is Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions is single-purpose snippets of code that are executed in a secure and managed Node.js environment within your Firebase project. So if you are predominantly used to coding in a different language, you can always write your functions in that language and then integrate them using Firebase. They're really, really cool tools, and they help you handle complex operations, such as managing your database. Say, for instance, you would like to change user permissions on your site. If you've used Stack Overflow before, you would see that they have quite an extensive use case for permissions and role-based authentication. But this allows you to do that really quickly. You can also send client emails, for example, when a user signs up for your app. You can send them a welcome email. You can also do many other things with Firebase and interact with Google services. But Andre, could you give me a little bit more insight into that?
Yes, for sure. So as you already mentioned, functions are a very, very neat way for you to basically separate your code from your client side. Sometimes there is some complex things you don't want to keep running on your users' web browsers or your users' phones, and you want to keep that on your server side. So what Firebase does is, unlike the conventional applications where you host a server, you need to configure that server and run the code there. Firebase provides you with cloud functions, which you can deploy as easily as just deploying your website. We're going to actually show how to do that in the future. Those functions will be triggered by some events that happen in Firebase. So if you get a new user signed in, or a new user creation, or a new document is being submitted, you can basically run a cloud function after that. So it's a very, very neat way. Like a very interesting example is, for example, if you want to send a welcome message to your new users, you could trigger a cloud function that would work with Gmail API, and cloud functions work with all of these services very, very well. And you'll be able to do that straight off the bat.
And then one of the really cool things about Firebase, is that some of these solutions are really common use cases. So if, for example, sending users emails, Firebase has Firebase extensions, and extensions are there to simplify these common use case scenarios. And these are collections of pre-made configurable functions, and they handle things such as resizing uploaded images, or sending client emails, or even translating all the text on your page to a different language, depending on where your user is coming from. And you can find a complete list of all of the available Firebase extensions on the documentation page, or directly from the extensions page of the Firebase console. Another nifty feature of Firebase is the Performance SDK. And although we won't be touching on it this series, we will hopefully get into it in the intermediary series. But it's basically used to gain some insight into your user experience. Some examples of this are monitoring how long it takes your app to start up, as well as some network bottlenecks, or maybe even custom traces. For example, how long would a user spend in your cart? Or how long does a user spend on a certain product? And that'll give you insight as to maybe your shoes are selling better than your bags. Things like that. Another really incredible feature about Firebase, and really one of my favorite features, is app distribution. And although we actually won't be covering it in this series, Dalton, you have experience with Flutter, and you use app distribution with the app development quite a lot. So could you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, so app distribution is one of my favorite features within Firebase. Its ability to distribute apps to testers is super useful for test-driven development, and it allows for quick feedback. Additionally, app distribution is great for getting feedback from end users and clients you are developing apps for. This is an awesome tool for verification testing, and it ensures that your product is meeting any requirements that you might have. The reason I love app distribution so much is because it integrates really easily with the distribution of Flutter apps. And possibly sometime in the future, I know a lot of everyone was tuning into the Flutter series, and we're hoping that we might be able to distribute some of the apps that Rohan made through app distribution going forward.
So now that we've seen all these services, there's a lot of incredible features that we haven't even got to mention yet, but we will hopefully be using most of them in the future. So at this point, we're actually going to start working on our project. So if you have a simple website that you've always wanted to deploy, you can use that and follow the same steps, or you can use the template that we're going to be providing. So if you would navigate to our store, there is a link to the GitHub. And once on the GitHub page, you can either clone the code or you can fork the code. And forking the code will allow you to make all the changes to the repository that you want, and then submit those changes to our develop branch remotely. And we really, really encourage this. We want to make this a community project, and we want to engage with all of you. And so all your changes are really, really welcome. Another thing to mention is that we're, again, going to be highlighting these contributors at the beginning of each session. And who knows, maybe there's some Google swag up for grabs. But for now, I'm going to grab this snippet over here, and we're going to create a new Firebase project. So I use WebStorm as my IDE of choice. However, you can really use any IDE you choose. Visual Studio, I know, is another popular one. Dalton has had some experience using Notepad++, although I wouldn't recommend it is an option. But we will be creating this new account. We'll be cloning our project by navigating to the place that you want it to be. And there's multiple ways to clone. You can do it within your IDE. You can get from version control, and then you can paste in the URL here. But I'm going to be using the terminal. So we will type git clone, and then we will paste in the URL. And as you can see, that'll create a copy of the project in our local machine. And once there, we can open this up. And let me just make this bigger. This is our main repository. When you initially clone the project, you're going to see the most up-to-date version of our repository. This will have all of the files and configuration settings that we have. However, we actually want to be working in a branch that we made specifically for this event. So most IDEs will have some version control system that allows you to check out. We want to be in the event 1 hosting event. I'm going to show you how to do that through the terminal. So if you have some software like Git Kraken, or if you do it through the IDE, that's fine too. But if you're looking to check out using the terminal, you can say git checkout, and then the name of the branch is event 1-hosting. And now you'll see that our project looks a little bit different. So now we only have...
Okay. Very quickly, we got a few requests. Can you slow it down a little bit? Go back to the steps. I know you're on autopilot right now because you've been doing this so many times. Let's go back to the beginning a little bit and walk each step by for some of our viewers who are following through.
Okay. Sorry about that. Madhusha, please stop me if I go crazy. So once we're on the GitHub page, there's a few options. So the first thing would be to fork it, and that's on the top right-hand side. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. But once you click fork, this will copy this repository onto your own GitHub account.
Okay. How do you get to your repo?
So our repo, we have a link dropped inside our website.
Okay, and what's the link to the website?
So I think we have a bit.ly link. If we can put that
so it's on here right now. This is the bit.ly link for the demo site. Some of you already came in, and that's why Rafa was able to show the analytics on the site. So if you still haven't gone it, what we did was we brought all our resources into the example that we're going to be using. So the e-commerce site has all the links. So back to you, Rafa.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me to go through that. So once we're on this, we have links for the different resources as well as the Firebase console. But we're actually going to be clicking on this link here, the contribute to this website. And once we open this link, it'll bring us directly to our Firebase project. So not exactly. It'll take us to the documentation page first for contributing. But you can get to the code by clicking this link over here. If I can make my screen a little bit bigger, it'll be right here, the intro to Firebase.
And this includes your this demo site that you put together. And anybody who wants to download it, customize it, play around with it, they're welcome to do that, or they're welcome to just use it as it is. And if they make any changes, they're welcome to put it back onto your and contribute to the rest of the community as well.
We would love that very much. We really want to engage with as many of you as possible. That means if you would like to reskin the site, so change the styling, or maybe you have some improvements to the functionality of the code, or maybe there's just a better way to do what we've already done. Any of these would be welcomed, and we'd love to showcase these contributions at the beginning of next week's event.
So Rafa, by the way, this website is built with what? HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript, or is it a framework that you end up using?
No, so this is going to be vanilla web development. We wanted to do this to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So there's no need to know about any frameworks. It's just a regular old HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then for those of you that are interested in contributing, we're using a CSS framework. So we are actually, in fact, using one framework just to manage all the styling, and it's called Bulma. But if you have a look in the documentation, there is a contributing file, and this will have everything that you need to know about getting started, all the front-end stuff, the back-end stuff, reporting bugs, submitting pull requests, all the rest of it. So now that we're on the main page, is everybody ready to pull the code down? If so, we can, again, copy this. And then we will navigate to wherever we like to have the project located. So if you are in Windows, an easy way to do this is to just click on this top bar, and then you can type in CMD. And once you type in CMD, it will open up a terminal window in the location that you were in previously. If you are in Mac or Windows, Mac or Linux, you can navigate to this directory using CD, or you can put it on your desktop too if you like. But then once we have this place of choice, we will clone the project using git. So we'll type in the command git and then clone. And then we will paste in the link from GitHub using the right-click mouse button. And then I'm not going to do this because it'll overwrite this, but that will then completely clone the project from GitHub onto your local computer.
We got a question from Kevin. After forking the repo on our GitHub, how would we contribute? Would we push our changes to a particular branch? Or any tips on that, Rafa, Adalto?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Andrew, would you like to talk a little bit about the contributing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way usually you would do this is when you fork your project, it's going to have like your username / the project name. So whenever you make any changes to your local project, you can then create a pull request towards our project. So it's going to be Rafael Zazas and then whatever the name of our application is, intro to Firebase. So you will be able to pull requests to our main repo, and we will review that pull request when it comes in. If you need more details on how to do that, feel free to jump into Discord, and we'll show you how to do that in one-on-one fashion. And
we'll also be there to explain the repository and how we've laid everything out and what we're doing. So if you have any questions about the code base itself, we're all available on GitHub. Sorry, not on GitHub. Well, yes, on GitHub, but also on Discord to respond to you. Right. And yeah, one other thing to mention is that, yeah, there is documentation for the contributing, but when you do make your pull requests, they will go to the develop branch. So we've got multiple branches here. We've got a develop branch, which is what we use for development. We have a master branch for when we have a decent code base that we say, okay, well, this is a good point, we'll merge it in there. But then for each event, we're going to be having specific branches that are going to be tied to that specific event. So in our case, we're going to be using the event 1 branch, the hosting, and yep. So once we are inside our IDE of choice, again, it will automatically put you into the develop branch or the master branch, but we want to be in our event 1 branch. And so to get there, usually your IDE will have a little button at the bottom right that has a ability for version control. I know it's a little bit small. I'm sorry about that. Let's see if I can. It's probably still a little bit small, but you can either check out using this tool in your IDE, or alternatively using the git commands, and the git command for checking out a branch is git checkout, and then you'll give the branch name. So in this case, it's event 1 dash hosting. And once you enter that command, this should refresh all the files inside your project, and it will give you everything that we've laid out for just this project. So going over the project just a little bit, we have a public directory. That's going to be useful, as you'll see in a bit, because that's where Firebase is going to look for our content. It's going to point automatically to our index page. And the index page is the loading page that we used, that we just demonstrated earlier. It's going to be the main page that you land on. We have separate files for JavaScript functionality. We have a folder for all our HTML files, as well as specific CSS that we need to write. And then we also have a folder for assets. And these are going to be any static images that you want to use in your site that are not going to be hosted with Firebase or Cloud Firestore. Once we're in the index.html, in order to use Firebase, we're going to need to install the core Firebase CDN script tag, as we mentioned earlier, the core Firebase SDK. So we've left that on line 26. So if you uncomment that line, you will have access to Firebase. Another thing that we will need to do is obtain some information from the Firebase console about our project. So if you look under the JavaScript, there is an app.js file. Within our app.js file, you'll see this is where we're going to be doing all of our configuration. So we need this Firebase config object because it has the API keys for your Firebase project, as well as where it should be hosted, as well as the database management and all the rest of it. One important thing to note is that it is okay to have this checked into version control. It is also okay to expose this because people need to have direct access to actually push anything to your Firebase project. So even though someone might have your API keys, it does not necessarily mean that they can interact with your Firebase project unless you give them permission to. So in order to get this configuration information, we will quickly navigate back to your Firebase project that you set up. And inside the Firebase project, you will see that there is a little gear icon in the top left that allows you to go to your project settings. And that is where you can get these Firebase configuration files. So this is our main app, but I'm going to go to the testing site that we've just made and have a look at our configuration files for this one. Under config, just copy this. And then we will go back to our IDE and just paste it right in here. So before we do that, we can uncomment this. So we have the entire object. We'll paste in our configuration settings. And then over here is where we're going to be initializing the app. So we're going to uncomment this line, and we're going to initialize the app, and we're going to paste in, we're going to put in our configuration settings. So this prepares our app for Firebase, but we actually haven't yet got Firebase in our app. So in order to do that, we have to not only log into Firebase, but initialize it. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll run a command in the terminal called Firebase login. And I'm already logged in, but if you are not, it'll give you an option to sign in using an OAuth provider. Oh, one thing before I get to this that I forgot to mention is that we did play the clip for installing the Firebase CLI. This requires the Firebase CLI. So if you haven't yet installed the Firebase CLI, you can do that by navigating to the Firebase console. So you can just click on Firebase, and you can go to the documentation page, at which point you can just search CLI. And that'll bring you up to the Firebase CLI documentation page. And over here, you can see that there is different options to install Firebase for different operating systems. For Windows, there's 2 options. You can install with npm using Node. So if you have Node installed on your computer, you can run the command npm install, and then the -g means globally, all the Firebase tools. Otherwise, you can install using the standalone binary. This is going to download an executable file. So all you'd need to do is download this somewhere, click on it, it'll run, it'll install everything that you need, and you'll be able to run the Firebase commands from that terminal. For Mac users and for Linux users, you have a third additional option, as well as the standard binary and npm. You can run an install script. So this is really easy. All you have to do is curl this URL. Oh, too big. But all you have to do is get this URL and paste it into your terminal, and this should install the Firebase tools in your system. So once we have all those Firebase tools, we should be able to then say Firebase init, and this will initialize a Firebase account, a project within our JavaScript application. And we are going to say, yes, we are ready to proceed with Firebase. This over here is going to give us an option to select which different Firebase SDKs we want to employ in our project. So for now, we're only going to be using the hosting SDK because we want to host the website on Firebase. And we're also going to be using emulators so that you can test the site in a local environment. We're going to be using an existing project, but because we've just created one. If you haven't created one yet, you can still do so now using the create a new project option. And then from here, you can select a project. And as we mentioned before, it's going to look at our public directory. So if you're using your own HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project, make sure that you have a public directory and your index.html is inside there. So we're going to say we want this. We're not going to configure this as a single page app, but if you would like to, there is the option for that. We're not going to use automatic builds, so we're going to say no for that. And we don't want to overwrite the public index HTML because we already have one. But if you are running from scratch, this will automatically create an index HTML file for you. The next thing is Firebase emulators. So Andrew, would you like to give a little bit of insight as to why we're going to be using emulators and what they are?
Yeah, so emulators are basically a very neat thing that was actually included quite maybe a couple of years ago, not too long ago, to Firebase. So you might remember that earlier we were showing how Firestore, changing data in your production Firestore database changes the app's appearance while you host the website. So in order for you not to make changes to your production data, because that Firebase config that we just configured is what connects your application that's running locally to your production environment. So not to mess anything up, you can have an emulator just set up in your local machine. So this will act as a production environment, but actually just emulating all the services. So you can safely run all your hosting, all your authentication and stuff like that.
Rafa, can you show them an emulator, what it looks like?
Yeah, sure. We actually first need to install the emulator. So we're just going to install the hosting emulator for now. But it's important to note as well that these settings can be configured once you've already set this up, just by running Firebase init. So we've got our emulator. We're going to use that port. We are going to use the emulator UI, so we're going to say yes to that. And then any available port is OK. We want to download those emulators now. And then once we have the project set up, everything should be done. We will have, over here, as you can see, it will automatically include some files, the Firebase RC and the Firebase.json file. And then we can run different Firebase commands like emulators. So we're going to run Firebase emulators, and then : and then start. and this will create a local version of our application. And as you can see, it hosts it on our local host on port 5000. So we'll click on this. And over here, we have a a demo version of the site that is completely interactable, although we have limited features on this because it's just for hosting purposes and to try and make it as simple as possible off the bat. But this will allow you to do everything from authenticate your users securely to accessing Firestore, as well as Andre mentioned, to read and write data that isn't in your production environment. So all the testing that you need to do can be done in emulators. And once we've already tested our site and we're sure that it's good and ready to go, we can actually deploy it to Firebase with one line, as we mentioned earlier. So if you are running the emulators, you can cancel them using Control-C, just to quit for the meantime, and we'll say yes. And then in order to deploy our site, this, in my opinion, is magic. And the first time I saw it, I was in awe completely. So we'll type in Firebase deploy. One line of code. And for those of you who have used other services, you'll know that this can be a nightmare to do. It automatically does things like elastic load balancing and managing all the hosted servers that you need to bounce your users off of. Really, really cool stuff. And once you've done that, it automatically gives you this hosting URL. So for those of you who have gone through this tutorial with us, you should have one of these as well. And we would love it at this point if you could all drop your own links in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to see your projects evolve with us. And once we've deployed the site, that's really it. We'll just keep going in the production cycle, and we'll learn about authentication next week and Firestore the week after that. So your site will evolve a little bit, and you'll have the ability to interact with it a little bit more like our main development site.
Raf, could you possibly go over the steps to do Firebase init again?
Yeah, of course. So once we have our project, we want to make sure that we've got the configuration settings and everything done. And then we'll just type the Firebase init command. And as you can see, it's completely okay to run Firebase init in a project that already has Firebase. So if you mess anything up, it's not a problem at all. You can just run init again, and it'll bring up the options one more time. So the first thing it's asking is which CLI features do we want to set up for this project? So in our case, we're going to be using a lot of them. But since we're only using hosting now and emulators, we're going to use the spacebar to select the features that we want. So spacebar for hosting, and we'll go down and spacebar for emulators, and then we'll hit enter. And then we will say that we want our directory to be the public directory. So hit enter, and we'll say that we don't want this to be a single page app. So we will hit N and then enter again. And then we're not going to use automatic builds and deploys with GitHub. Although, if you are a CI/CD wizard and you would love to help us out with that, please do. We'd love to have some GitHub actions. But for now, we're going to say N for no. And then because we already have a 404, you can write yes to make a new one, or you can write no to keep the one that you have. We don't, however, want to overwrite our index.html. So this one, please make sure to say no, because we have an index.html already. And then for our emulators, we can really install all these emulators now. But since we have individual events for most of these things, we're going to be installing these emulators in the events. Now we just want hosting, so we'll use the spacebar to select hosting. We'll click enter. And then we'll say yes to download the emulators. And I think because I'd already downloaded them, it skipped a little bit of steps. But for you, you would just say yes, yes, and to enter. and that'll give you access to the Firebase emulators and all the other Firebase tools we might need. Are there any other points that I should go over again? If not, I think now would be a great time to transition into some Q&A.
Yeah. If anybody has any problems during the setup that we just had, feel free to post your errors or whatever problems you have in the Discord, and we might actually just have enough time to go over them with Raf and show everybody how to solve those problems, because setups and CLI commands are always different for every platform.
We could also talk about the repository and how we structured the code.
Exactly.
I'd like to have a look at the so we can see we still had some users jump on. And we're getting from North America as well as from Nairobi in Kenya, as well as India, Egypt. We've got users in Italy, South America. This is really cool. But yeah, thank you guys very much. And again, we're just here for any questions that you may have.
Did anybody share any of their sites that they were able to upload?
Yeah,
we got one in Discord.
Would you mind, Rafa, putting it publicly on everybody on your screen, or one of you can share it on your screen so the rest of them can see it?
Oh yeah, sure.
And there's tons of questions coming in. Dalton, Andre, I know you were answering them, but I think it would be also nice for everybody else to see it. Any interesting questions you think we should pull up on the screen?
Let's have a look.
So here we can see, I really hope I don't mess your name, but Ansapiro, you deployed the site. So here's his site over here. And if he makes any changes and deploys it again, we can see that as well.
Oh, so that's their site? Okay.
That's their site, yeah. Completely unique to them.
And could you zoom in on the link and everything? So as you can see, that's a free hosting that was from Firebase, which is kind of cool.
And this link is completely theirs.
So they got it. They got everything there. Okay, awesome. So by the way, you're welcome to share it with the rest of as a comment down on the chat, and then the rest of them can join in and click it. Now the interesting thing is then you will see all the traffic where it's coming from on the analytics tool if you enabled it. Dalton, Rafa, we're getting some questions. It's going to be displayed there. Welcome to jump on in and answer it.
Yeah, so for this question about Flutter, Flutter is mostly used for sort of developing that front-end framework, handling all your click events and sort of sending that information back to the back end, which is where Firebase really starts to handle it. Firebase has the database side of it. You can have the cloud functions do things. That's sort of where Firebase comes in together, and it really helps create that tech stack that we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So together they will make your tech stack. Your front end will be done predominantly on Flutter so that you can configure everything that the users need to see and touch and interact with. And then Firebase is there to handle everything behind the scenes. Oh, yeah, of course.
While you find the code, there was a good question about Firebase login. So the question was, should you run login before init or vice versa? And does it matter? Actually, it does. So you need to run Firebase login before you run Firebase init. And that's very important because Firebase needs to understand which user to associate your projects with. Because what Firebase init will do, it will pull all your projects for your user, for your Google user. And then you can pick one of those projects to associate your local environment with. So be sure to log in first. And if you have any errors, I saw there was somebody having some issues with that, feel free to post those in Discord. But yeah, after you run login, you should be successfully running init after that.
And then just to go over again, one more thing that I forgot to mention is that over here, we are actually importing the app.js file. So we're separating our Firebase configuration files from our main index. But if you wanted to, you could do it in your main index as well. And so within our app.js, we needed to uncomment this section here. And this is our configuration object. And then we're going to be pasting in our own individual API keys from the Firebase console. So if we go back to the Firebase console, you'll see that there's a little gear icon with project settings. Project settings, you'll scroll down, you'll go to your web application, config, and then you'll copy these configuration files, and they go right here. And then the other thing you would need to uncomment is the initialize Firebase line. So this line over here, line 19, this will initialize your app with all of these Firebase settings. So once we've done that, another place we'll need to uncomment lines is right here. And this is where we are initializing the core Firebase SDK. And it's important to note that the core SDK is always required and it must be listed first. So next week, we will see how to authenticate users, and we're going to be using the authentication SDK. And in that case, we're going to have a separate script tag, and that's going to go right below our core SDK. And then as we go along in the series, this is just going to build, and we're going to use the Firestore and analytics and all the other SDKs that are available with Firebase.
Yeah, so we have a question here about how to get to Q&A on the Discord. So first thing that you want to do when you join the Think Outside the Valid Discord is go into that rules channel that you're able to see. From there, you want to read all of the rules and scroll to the bottom. And that will allow you to react with a green check mark. That will give you access to the rest of the server. And then from there, you're able to join any of the other channels, read any of the other channels, and you can join the Q&A channel from there. And if anyone was able to get their website hosted and wants to send it, feel free to send it in the Firebase series channel in the Think Outside the Valley Discord. That way we're able to check it out.
Another thing worth mentioning, I think, is that a lot of the workthroughs that we're having this event and next event could be found on the docs of Firebase, which are very, very great resource for you. I believe they are included in our resources tab in our website. So even if you get lost or you don't want to, for some reason you don't want to go on the Discord server, you can always follow along on the docs, and they have pretty good explanation of maybe even better than we can provide to basically set up your project and get it running.
So I think I can take this question. We actually only did a previous video for the installation of the Firebase CLI. We actually made this e-commerce store just together. We don't have a video exactly explaining how we did it, but if that's something that you'd be interested in, I'm sure we wouldn't mind to do that.
Yeah, the reason we didn't include it in any events is because there was nothing related to Firebase. So it's basically just a static HTML, CSS, JavaScript project. But yeah, if you want to learn how we created that, we can for sure talk about that and maybe showcase that in a future event. Yeah, that was a question I was talking about. So in order to run Firebase init, and actually if you try to run Firebase init before Firebase login, it's going to tell you that that's something you cannot do. You need to Firebase login first.
I think this might be a good time as well, let me share my screen to show some of the resources that we've provided. So on our site, if you ever look at the More tab, there's a link to resources. And we've left links to the official Firebase documentation. So this is going to take you to the documentation on the Firebase site, as well as examples and documentation on GitHub, as well as some questions on Stack Overflow. And then I know I like to learn a lot through YouTube, and so we've listed some YouTube heroes. Over here, you can see Jeff Delaney. He is a Google developer expert. He runs a website called fireship.io, and it is an incredible resource. There's also the Net Ninja on YouTube, also incredible resource. And then finally, there's the official Firebase YouTube channel. And that, again, is probably one of the best places to go for getting some information right from the source.
Okay, so let's give it a few more minutes to answer any questions. So I guess this is a great start. All you had to do was you had a website that you already created. Now you hosted it with Firebase. You integrated everything in there. What are we going to do next week?
Yeah, next week is going to be interesting. We will provide you with some starter codes as well. And we're going to jump right into
What do you mean by starter code?
So same way this week you had a hosting one branch, we would provide another branch for you to start coding from. Or if you want to continue working on your project, you can do so as well. If you want to follow along one-to-one, we will be providing that starter code for you next week. We will be jumping into authentication. We will implement login. We will implement sign up. And also include some awesome provider things like sign up with Google, sign up with GitHub, and also touch on some Firebase UI and how that could be done very, very easily with some built-in functionality. So yeah, I'm very excited to share that, and I hope it's going to go well next week as well.
So for example, anybody can log into this e-commerce site, and now they'll have an account associated with it. Are we going to go as far as creating a cart for them, or throughout the series, or is it just which platform you want to use to log in? It can be, like, as you said, social media login features like Facebook and Google, and you'll also get to see what kind of information you're able to pull from those accounts, correct? Like their first name, last names, email addresses.
Yeah, we'll see. We won't go as deep as the cart or anything like that. So there might even not be any personalized features yet. We'll only show how to store users in your application and how to log them in. And as you mentioned, we will see all the data coming in from those providers, so like profile images, email addresses, and stuff like that that's tailored towards the logged in user.
Awesome. Anything else, Rafa, like any other prep work they need to do, anything that you recommend? And let's talk about, do you have office hours planned for this week if they get stuck I know this is a recorded session. You can always go back and follow through. I think we tried to focus a lot more on the concepts behind Firebase today rather than jumping into the coding part, really. What's the week going to look like for you all?
So I would love to have some office hours available. I'm going to be a little bit booked up for the beginning of the week, but I think towards the end of the week, I would love to. And I think both Andre and Dalton are relatively free on Friday evenings as well as Saturday mornings. So, or even maybe Sundays. I guess.
How do they join? How do they do the request one-on-one?
I think the easiest for me at least would be just send me a message on Discord. I'll respond to you quite quickly there, and we can either set up a one-on-one time, or if there's a group of you, we can get a group together, and maybe myself, Andre, and Dalton can all come together, and we can have a bit of a group coding session.
Absolutely, yeah, I +1 that. So we'll figure out a time. We obviously everybody lives in the different time zones, so we'll figure out a time that works for everybody. Just drop a message in the Firebase series chat, and we'll figure things out. So
awesome. If there's nothing else, any final thoughts, gents?
Just going over the contribution a little bit more. If you feel free to contribute to the site, and definitely share what you're contributing, because we want to see it. We want to sort of see how everyone's doing, see everyone's creativity, and sort of going off of that, and would probably go showcase some of the contributions going forward.
Okay, that's pretty good. And by the way, the site that you built, it's responsive. It's also mobile friendly. I highly recommend opening it up on a mobile browser, and then see whether you can interact with it. You see whether you can log into it. That being said, I think this was a great session, guys. Thank you. Yes, make sure to send us questions if you have any. We're going to take any other questions on Discord. Welcome to share this with your friends. It's always good to work together and collaborate with your friends. Paired programming or doing it as a group always helps out. I know there are resources available online, but then when you get stuck, so you end up spending a lot of time trying to figure it out, and it's always difficult to do it when you're alone. So highly recommend use Discord. We set it up for you to collaborate easily. Even if you might see people on the Firebase channel that you can ping and say, hey, I want to show you something. Let's jump onto stage 1 or Q&A lobbies, and then you can showcase it and have those discussions going. I know this is a very fundamental, like elementary session that we just did, but we're going to slowly dive deeper into all the other elements going forward. As these 3 gentlemen mentioned, this is just the introductory sessions. I think we're going to do 2 more, and then we're going to dive deeper into certain verticals, and we might even bring our previous hosts like Rohan to like go deep into integrating Firebase into Flutter applications that he built. And we're super excited to see what you are building over the holidays. And there was a few other speakers I want to bring in, by the way, where you can integrate Firebase into hardware projects. So you can pretty much do like a brain control drone across the continent. And I've seen that done before using Firebase. Again, the power raised, how responsive the system is, and how quickly you can communicate and send messages out there. So super excited. And once again, thank you so much for joining. And we're going to wrap the session up, but the discussion we can continue on Discord. So if you're having trouble, drop a line, join us there, and see you all next week.
Thank you all.